When the dusty little town of Elk Ridge stirred awake on that early spring morning, nobody expected the arrival of the Carson twins to cause the kind of commotion that would have every shopkeeper pausing mid-sweep and every gossiping widow leaning out her window. But that was exactly the case as 10-year-old Eli and Emma marched down Main Street with the confidence of two tiny sheriffs who had a mission from God himself, dragging behind them their weary father, rancher Luke Carson, who had spent the last 3 years raising them alone after losing his wife during childbirth, and who now found himself being pulled toward the small, weather-beaten boarding house on the edge of town where a woman the whole town whispered about Marybeth Holloway had taken a room, trying her best to disappear from society's cruel judgment. For as beautiful as she was, with her soft eyes, long copper hair, and smile that once could light up any church social, the people of Elk Ridge had written her off as too wide to wed, a phrase whispered with mean delight by women threatened by her gentleness and by men who secretly stared too long but never dared step forward. Luke had heard the whispers too, had seen her only twice from afar, once when she knelt to feed a stray dog and once when she limped, slightly carrying a sack of flour up the boarding house steps. But he didn't imagine she would ever have anything to do with him or his children. Yet here he was, forced into the moment by his twins who had woken him before sunrise, insisting they had found the perfect one, which he dismissed as childish nonsense until he realized they were serious, dragging him through town in front of everyone who now watched with wide eyes as the rancher approached the widow who had become the subject of endless whispered gossip. They reached the boarding house just as Marybeth stepped outside, clutching a folded shawl around her shoulders, startled by the sight of 3 Carson standing before her like some strange family portrait she never asked to be part of. And before Luke could think of a single polite greeting, little Emma stepped forward with her braids bouncing and announced, "We want this one, Daddy," while pointing boldly at Marybeth as if she were picking out a birthday cake instead of a woman. The widow's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief while Luke nearly choked, stammering something about apologies and misunderstandings. But the twins pushed ahead, explaining with childish sincerity that they needed someone who smiled kindly, who looked like she would hug real tight, and who seemed lonely like us. And Marybeth, who had been trying so hard to remain unnoticed, felt her throat tighten, not with embarrassment, but with the shock of being seen, truly seen for the first time since her own husband died 3 winters ago, leaving her not only widowed, but shunned because her hips were a little wider, her step a little heavier, and her heart a little softer than the town's cruel beauty standards permitted. Luke tried to gently reprimand his children, but Marybeth kneeled down instead, asking softly, "And why would you want me, sweet ones?" And the twins answered without hesitation, "Because you look like you need a family too." Those simple words cut deeper than any gossip ever had, silently asking if this was some joke or cruel trick. Yet something inside him shifted because for the first time, he really looked at her, saw past the rumors, saw a woman with a brave heart hiding beneath the weight of everyone's unkind words, saw warmth, grace, and strength in her soft features. Before he could speak, Mrs. Harper, the meanest gossip in town, stepped out of the bakery and called loudly, "Lord help you, Luke Carson," choosing a woman who's too wide to fit through a chapel door. The twins spun around like wildcats, shouting back, "She's perfect," while Marybeth froze, humiliated, trembling. And that was the moment Luke stepped forward, placing his hat to his chest, and said in a voice that silenced the entire street, "Ma'am, I reckon the only thing that's too wide in this town is the space between folks. Kindness and their mouths." Gasps erupted everywhere. "Miss Holloway, would you join us for lunch?" "No expectations, just company." She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his, and the twins cheered as if they'd already won the county fair, while the rest of the town whispered louder than ever, not knowing that this was the moment everything would change forever. Marybeth Holloway had never been inside the Carson ranch house before, and as she stepped into the warm wooden cabin filled with the scent of pine, fresh cornbread, and childhood laughter, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of home trying to settle into her bones. though she kept reminding herself that it was only lunch, only kindness. Nothing more, but her heart betrayed her by fluttering every time Luke glanced her way with those steady eyes that seemed to apologize for every cruel whisper the town had thrown at her. She sat at the long table while the twins chattered nonstop, telling her every detail about their ponies, their chores, their missing socks, and how they'd decided she was the one because she had the prettiest sad smile, a comment that made Luke choke and Marybeth blush. As the hours passed, her shoulders relaxed, her laughter returned in small gentle bursts, and for a moment, she forgot that she was someone the town labeled too wide to wed, because here in this cabin, she was simply Marybeth. The softness of her voice, the way she wiped crumbs from Emma's cheek with the tenderness of a mother, and every time he did, guilt shot through him because he hadn't planned on feeling anything, hadn't expected this warmth blooming inside him like spring flowers forcing their way through snow. And yet it was there, undeniable, haunting him even as he tried to remain respectful, cautious, aware that she'd been hurt by loss and judgment and might not want to bear the weight of anyone's hopes. After lunch, Emma tugged Marybeth into the garden, insisting she see the twins' newly planted apple tree, and as Marybeth leaned over to admire it, Luke stepped beside her, his voice low as he asked, "Do you feel safe here?" She looked up, startled by the question, then nodded slowly, saying, "Safer than I expected. Safer than anywhere else in a long time." Her voice trembled, and Luke felt an ache deep in his chest, an ache that whispered he didn't want this feeling to end. The afternoon grew warm, and Luke saddled the twins' ponies, offering Marybeth a ride on his horse, Bramble, and though she hesitated, aware of her size and the stares she usually received, Luke saw the fear in her eyes and simply said, "You're safe with me," offering his hand. She accepted, letting him lift her with strong, steady arms, and the moment she settled onto the saddle, the tension melted from her shoulders. They rode through the fields, the twins racing ahead while Marybeth clung to Luke from behind, her heartbeat thudding softly against his spine. And by the time the sun dipped low, casting gold across the ranch, an unfamiliar peace wrapped around them like a warm blanket. But peace rarely lasted long in a town that fed on gossip. Whispers had already twisted into wild rumors. "Luke's taken in the widow. He's fixing to marry her. She's after his ranch. She'd never be a proper wife." The cruel words struck Marybeth hard, reopening wounds she'd tried to forget. And when Mrs. Harper sneered, "You'll break his horse before you break his heart," Marybeth fled behind the livery, tears burning her eyes. Luke found her moments later, trembling in humiliation, whispering, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't fit beside you." His jaw clenched, pain blazing in his eyes as he stepped closer and said firmly, "You fit beside me better than anyone ever has." She tried to look away, but he gently cupped her cheek, forcing her to see the sincerity in his gaze as he whispered, "Marybeth Holloway, there's not a thing wrong with you, not your hips, not your step, not your heart. If you let me, I'd like to show this town the truth, that you're a blessing I never expected." Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from sorrow but from the shock of being cherished instead of judged. And when Luke pulled her into his arms, the world finally went quiet. The twins squealed with delight, shouting, "Daddy loves her! Daddy loves her!" And even the townsfolk who once whispered cruel things found themselves softening as they watched the widow and the rancher stand together in the golden afternoon light. And in that moment, Marybeth realized that love wasn't something she had to shrink herself to deserve. It was something that found her exactly as she was. And the town of Elk Ridge would never forget the day Luke Carson chose the widow the world called too wide to wed, only to find that no woman fit more perfectly in his life, his home, or his heart. Dostan, Agriyakahani ni Apka Dil Chulia Ho. To Heartlight Stories Ko Zerur subscribe Karen. Apka Click Humine or Zyada Pyari. Dil Ko Chu Lean Wali Kahanian Benain Ka Hosla Dita Hai.